Hey guys, and welcome to part 2 of our Ultimate Zelda Breath of the Wild discussion. This time the topics include the Divine Beasts, boss fights, Calamity Ganon, and much more. Now if you missed part 1, there's a link to it in the description below. Otherwise, let's pick right back up where we left off at. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit here, and we kind of touched on her earlier, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the Divine Beasts. Because those are essentially the temples of this game, yet they're handled quite a bit differently than most. And I know these seem to be a little bit divisive. I've seen some people that really enjoy them, and some people, such as you, Derek, who were let down by them, evidently. And I might be the positive one here. I actually liked the Divine Beast overall, except for with one glaring exception. But overall, especially the first one, when I first went to that to the elephant one, I thought that was really cool. I liked that it was non-linear. I liked that you could go you had to activate these nodes, and that you had this global function in the form of the, in that case, the elephant's trunk, and how that factored into puzzles throughout the temple, and how that adjusted, like where the water would come in, and also how you could climb the trunk and which other areas of the temple. I love that, as well as how those were similarly applied to the other temples for the most part, or Divine Beasts, as well as also the fact the scenery. I love that you're on these giant beasts. Like in the case of the camel, for instance, which is the one I otherwise hated, I loved how you could just look out at any point and see the ground, see the entire world, moving around you, or you're moving around it. Like, I thought that was really cool. So I actually thought the Divine Beasts were maybe a highlight for me, even. See,
it's funny. I actually sided with Derek on this one. The best thing I can say about the Divine Beasts as dungeons was that I only hated one of them, and that was Naboris, which is the camel.
Yeah, the camel sucked, straight up.
But, I honestly, as the Divine Beast being dungeons, I think Breath of the Wild has some of the weakest dungeons in the whole series. I'm going to put it out right there. I didn't really enjoy any of them except maybe for Va Meadow, which is the bird. And I do agree with you, Andre. The coolest thing for me about the Divine Beast was seeing the world around you while you're on them. And for me, Va Meadow was like the ultimate version of that, because you're literally on a bird in the sky and you can see all of Hyrule around you. And I love that. And I love that in all the other Divine Beasts as well. But I gotta say, like, the actual process of playing through them, if I ever do replay Breath of the Wild, that would be the part that I'd be looking forward to the least. I didn't get anything out of the dungeons, and I didn't find them to be that fun. And the boss fights too, I thought almost unilaterally were really disappointing, and among maybe the worst in the series.
I don't disagree with the bosses. I think the bosses were weak in general. And especially, again, the freaking camel one, because that battle took place in a room clearly not designed for that battle. Like, at least I felt that way.
That was one of the worst fights. Like, oh, wait. Actually, no, wait. That was Thunderblight Ganon, which might have been one of the only fights I thought was pretty cool.
What?
Because it was one of the only ones that was actually challenging. The first time
because of bad design.
Possibly. And I won't necessarily disagree with that, but I don't know. I actually felt like Thunderblight Ganon was one of the only bosses that actually put up a decent fight. Like, my first boss, literally the first boss I fought in the game was Fireblight Ganon, and I beat him without taking a hit. I didn't get hit.
That's the Rito region one?
That's the Goron one. Fireblight.
I mean, it's been a while since I've played him, so I'm having trouble remembering.
Sorry, so the Goron boss. That was my first boss, and I didn't get hit even once. I'm like, what the hell is this madness?
What was his gimmick? Was he the one that you needed to throw a bomb at eventually at the second half?
Yeah, which is the same as he was a glorified rock Octorok.
See, that's the thing. It took me forever to figure out to throw the damn bomb. I was trying everything. For some reason, I forgot about bombs. And as soon as I did it and tried it just offhand, and I saw the bomb get sucked in, I'm like, "Oh, you stupid idiot! How could you forget about bombs?"
But it's so disappointing. Like, that's all you had to do.
Otherwise, he was a pushover. Otherwise, he was a complete pushover. Just me trying to figure out the bomb aspect of it. Going back to the Divine Beast real quick before we get into the bosses for each of them. I guess I had sort of you were talking about how people were talking about it, and then you get your expectations oh, that wasn't quite as good. For me, it was the opposite. I'm like, oh, these are what the shrines are going to be. I can't wait to see what they're going to do for the dungeons and have that classic idea. And then I get to it, it's like, oh, this thing's really small. There's not much to it. And then, of course, going to each of the nodes, and I did get stuck on the first one I did, which was the elephant, and that's because I just forgot about manipulating the trunk. And once I figured that out and realized how each section kind of worked, I got the basics of it, but then it was the minute details that sort of kept me, and it was like, oh, okay. And then I had no trouble with any of the other Divine Beast after that. And I don't know. It works for what it is. I can't say I had a bad time in them. It just they don't stand up at all to classic dungeons from Zelda games.
See,
that's my problem.
Yeah, I agree.
I can see that. I don't know if it's fully fair to compare them to
And it's
like
not,
one-on-one
no.
because. So I mean, I'm also coming at this from a different perspective though, because I'm one of those weird Zelda fans.
Oh,
who,
right, you hate dungeons.
I don't hate dungeons, but the 3D ones are my least favorite parts of those games for the most part, with a few exceptions. Basically, I think the getting lost in those labyrinths and solving these puzzles on a room per room basis can just get tiring. Like, I don't know. I feel like they're often depressing looking. They're not like, I don't like being in them. And I felt like they're better paced than the 2D ones. The 3D ones just, I don't know, they just feel like they're just draining to me. So the fact that the Divine Beasts were shorter overall, I'm like, yeah, I'm cool with that. But I think my favorite thing about them was that they did incorporate these global puzzles with the global element they can adjust from any point. Like, I like that. That was really cool. And I actually hope they take that idea and move it forward, even if they bring back more typical temples. Like, I like the idea that these puzzles are on a grander scale instead of being a room-to-room type thing, where you're just solving, like, these, micro puzzles.
And that may be a stylistic thing. Like, to me, I don't know, I guess to me, because of the really the heavy reliance on those big central puzzles, Breath of the Wild's dungeons to me recalled most closely Majora's Mask's dungeons, and I didn't really like them. So I'm not too surprised that for a similar reason I didn't really enjoy Breath of the Wild's dungeons, but I definitely got a Majora's Mask vibe overall from the dungeon design. And I think that was absolutely on purpose, and I just think, you either enjoy that kind of dungeon design or you don't. And that plus, it's funny what you said, Andre, about the 3D dungeons and other Zelda games feeling depressing to you. That's how I felt about the Divine Beast, because they all look the same inside. Whereas in other 3D Zelda games, you have these themed dungeons, and yeah, the themes might be a little rote. You have the Forest Temple, you have the Fire Temple, I get that. But at least they're different. Literally, these 4 beasts, if you didn't enter them from the outside, I would not know which one you're in on any given room, unless you're in the room with, like, the elephant's trunk, for example. But, like, other than that, there's literally no way to tell them apart. And it's just, with the shrines also being all samey, it just felt too... It all felt too similar to me. I didn't like that the dungeons didn't have more things differentiating them.
I think it would be less of an issue if it weren't for the shrines as well, which I agree with. Like, the exact same complaint applies to the shrines, where they look identical on the inside, barring whatever individual puzzle is there. And yeah, I would agree with that. I think it annoyed me more for the shrines for a couple reasons. One, there's more of them. Two, by the end, I was starting to get really sick of that freaking loading animation where you have to activate the thing, then you skip the cutscene, then you have to ride the elevator down, then you get the text that pops up on screen. And I felt like it didn't bother me at first, but after like 90 of them, or however many I beat, I'm like, okay, this is getting a little bit old, and I think it's almost a little bit of a shame. Again, this is coming across worse than it actually is. But in a game that otherwise is so seamless in everything, you can go inside without any loading screens, even in the temple or the Divine Beast. No loading screens either. All these shrines, though, they all have these annoying and jarring loading screens, which I feel like they found a more elegant way around that. Like, even something as simple as the Metroid Prime elevator, which they even have the elevator there. Why not do something like that? Something that can tie it in better than these jarring loading screens.
Sure.
Yeah, no, yeah. I could definitely see that, and I don't want to say that they definitely like looked the same, but at least there were elements. Like, there was one that had the rooms were all dark. The other one, you did play with water a little bit with the giant water wheel. There were things to help differentiate them and make it a little bit more unique, but I don't know, it just wasn't quite enough for me. I wanted just a little bit more to what I was getting, and maybe strike that balance between, like, this seems like complete 180, which I granted was the idea, but the entire idea behind this Zelda game is to do, like, eschew all the conventions, but something a little bit closer to the classic dungeons while still pulling off this idea where you can go anywhere, because you don't pick up an item for this dungeon. You have all your tools at all times. You don't have to go in this particular order, and that having it open up like that could be really interesting for a more traditional dungeon. For the nodes, it was fine.
Before we move on from the Divine Beast, we have been going in pretty hard on them, and I do want to just outline one thing I really did like about them.
You guys have.
Well, that's true. Derek and I have. But one thing I did really appreciate about the Divine Beast from a presentational standpoint was the fact that the music would build up between each node. So it would start off very ambient, but then you'd activate a node, and then you'd get like a new layer of music added. And then I'd activate another one, and then you get another layer of music. And so by the end, when you're ready to go to the boss, you got the full version of the dungeon song, and it just felt like things were building up to a big confrontation with, you know, the piece of Calamity Ganon in that Divine Beast. And I like that a lot. I really liked the music ramping up, and I thought it kind of added some stakes there, I guess.
I don't know if I even consciously recognize that. That sounds really cool, though. It might be because I was probably stuck in that fourth loop in the desert one for like hours.
I also, as far as a good point about the Divine Beast, I love the lead-ups to them. Like, not all of them hit the best, but at least you were always doing something interesting before you got into the dungeons, whether it was riding on Sidon's back, knocking down ice, or protecting the damn Goron from getting detected, or flying around and using your arrows to knock down that, or doing the sand. Like, they were always pretty interesting and fun, and just changed up the game's pace just enough to make it interesting and exciting as you're making your way into the Divine Beast. So that I really liked.
I also loved those sequences, but my problem with them is that they were way too easy. Just as I got into, like, really the cinematic bombast of, say, you know, sand surfing around the camel's legs to deactivate them, they all only took one arrow each. And then it's done. And I wanted it to feel more epic. I wanted it to feel more difficult. Like, that there was a multi-stage battle going on here. Not you shoot each of the camel's legs with, like, 1 or 3 arrows or however many it was, and then you're done. Like,
the worst part is, everything you're describing is the final battle in the game.
Well, the second part of the final battle, I think it's important.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. The last thing you do in the game is what you just described.
Totally, yeah, completely right. And wow, that fight, and of course, I messaged you guys right after I beat it. But talk about a mixed. I loved parts of that final battle and that whole finale, but then I hated other parts of it.
Here's a part I liked. I liked how Ganon looked.
Me too!
That design was awesome.
It was
right?
really, it almost, I don't know if this is accurate at all or not, but it reminded me of, like, almost Thing Ganon. Like, if Ganon were the Thing, that's what he would look like, and I love that. It was super cool. Unfortunately, everything else about the battle I felt was a little bit of a letdown, especially the second half, as we were just touching on in the field. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I will say in general, I was damn impressed by the first part of that battle. Like, whatever part of the boss is called Calamity Ganon, I thought that fight was ace. Now, the Dark Beast Ganon, I have a lot of things to say about that, but I gotta say, that first part, I mean, you know, obviously, yes, if you're completely powered up, it's way too easy. But if you're not, I could see it actually being pretty difficult, and despite that, just the way it was presented, the looks, like how Ganon himself looks, the music, the arena, the way Ganon moved around on the walls, he was like this twisted, like, amalgamation of, like, guardian legs and, like, spider parts, and it was so cool. Like, I didn't expect Nintendo to go that dark with Ganon's design, and the way he came out of that pulsating, like, egg sac thing, and all, like, I guess, like, the birthing fluid was all dripping everywhere. It was nasty. It was so nasty, but
You're making me sick to my stomach just thinking about it.
Right? It's like, it's messed up, but it's cool.
Yeah, they actually do describe it as, like, Ganon just didn't get a chance to get fully formed before Link got in there, which even puts even less impetus on you getting to the castle right away, because even no matter how long you take, he's not going to finish forming.
Yeah.
You still had that time. But no, as far as the look, like that, having that, just like when I first saw him and just seeing his open skull, but he still had the beard and then just all the limbs, and how they got the Sheikah technology in there is like, along with his own Calamity, it was like, oh, that's such a beautiful design as far as just like how Ganon has degraded over the centuries that it's been since he was last defeated.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can just see the toll that constantly defeating him is taking on his body, and it's like, it's so brilliant as far as just design-wise. But then the boss itself was, you know, like I said, I was fully powered up. I had pretty good armor. it wasn't anything hard, but it was still exciting and different because he's climbing all over the walls, you're dodging his attacks, you're getting in for just the right moment, and it felt epic and appropriate. And then you get to that second half.
Okay, well, I'm gonna pause it right there. We'll get back to the second half.
Yeah, I agree.
Because there's a lot to talk about here, I feel like. So I want to say the build up to Ganon in Hyrule Castle in general, I love that. I loved being able to go through Hyrule Castle. I love the music playing during it.
Oh, so good.
That felt epic. Now, once you actually get to Ganon, again, I liked his design. However, I felt like they made a bit of an error with how the game was structured. Because as soon as I went to Ganon for the first time, which was after I beat the 4 Divine Beasts, he instantly gets just pummeled by lasers, and it takes out half his health instantly. So that sent the message whoa, Ganon is a wuss. What's with this guy? He's already half dead. I didn't do anything. So I felt like it didn't start off on a particularly strong note for me, and it didn't help that he already was pretty weak. He wasn't hard to finish off from that point once once you learn how to damage him once he turns golden or whatever. So I felt like they could have handled that better. I wish maybe there had been, well, for instance, apparently when, I haven't seen this myself, apparently if you try to go Ganon without being the Divine Beast, you have to fight all 4 forms of Ganon there, before actually attacking Ganon himself. The other
blights.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
I didn't either. Now, what would have been cool, I think, or another way of handling it, perhaps, is if no matter what, you had to fight them. And I don't know, they had to figure out something else later if you decided to go there earlier. But no matter what, if you had to fight them to get to Ganon, but maybe going to the Divine Beasts are what takes them away. So then, no matter what, you're fighting a fully powered up Ganon. So it's because I felt like, I don't know, it just having him be already half dead just kind of sent the message okay, well, this isn't really that big of a deal. It's just Ganon, another Ganon again, whatever.
Well, on one hand, I did like that it followed through with the message that these divine beasts are super powerful, and they were created specifically to keep Ganon at bay and destroy Ganon. So that did kind of line up with that. However, I agree with what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, and I think maybe an elegant way they could have done it is not only have how many divine beasts be the sole determinant of how powerful Ganon is. Get the game clock involved. If you take 150 hours to beat the game like I did, that naturally means Ganon has had more time to pulsate in his creepy egg and grow more powerful, so have that be a factor. So yeah, you got your 4 divine beasts. They do some damage, but if you've also taken 150 hours getting there, the chunk of health those divine beasts take off might be significantly less than if you got there in 30 hours.
Oh my god, I actually really love that idea.
Right?
But I know a lot of people hate it. Yeah. I love that idea. I'm one of those people, I love the clock of Pikmin. I love the time element of Majora's Mask. So the way you describe that now is like music to my ears. I actually think that would have addressed some of my problems with the lack of urgency. That would have completely fixed the lack of urgency.
Let me be clear though. I'm not talking about a time limit. I'm not talking about the game reminding you.
No, right.
No. Just this is how long it took. This is how long he fully formed, and maybe at a certain point he's fully formed, and that needs to fight him at his best or something like that.
That's a good one. Yeah, it caps out at some point.
But to have this unknown, because there's always that constant joke in every RPG is well, we can access the final boss. Time to putz around for 30 hours doing all the mini games and side quests, and we'll get to him later. While in Final Fantasy VII, while Meteor's coming, that's no impetus.
Yeah.
So to have to play on that trope where, hey, I can just putz around, it doesn't matter. And actually, Ganon is getting harder and harder as you explore and do more.
That's such a good idea!
Yeah. That would be brilliant!
Because that kind of ties into what I said earlier. It would have been cool if you see Ganon appear, if you see just little snippets of him, Calamity Ganon at points, getting more powerful, right? That would tie in perfectly with that idea.
Like a Blood Moon type cutscene, where it just happens for no reason, but you're oh, Calamity Ganon's getting stronger, and you don't know why, but it is.
I would argue not even put a cutscene, just you happen to see Hyrule Castle, and then Ganon's doing something oh, what's going on over there?
Or maybe you see a spire of light fly into the sky or something. Yeah,
exactly. Kind of like the dragons, how you're walking around and all of a sudden a dragon pops out of nowhere. What the hell? At those set points, all of a sudden Ganon's doing something. You're oh.
And I feel like that would also maybe address some of the game's problems in terms of difficulty balance, because this game has a weird curve where it starts off really difficult and it keeps being pretty difficult until you get to a certain point, and then it gets so easy and laughably easy. And I feel like if Ganon scaled up in power with Link, depending on how long Link decided to go search for all the shrines, that would be a really elegant solution to that.
That's a good. I mean, I actually kind of agree with that because the game seemed really freaking hard when you first start off.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, by the end, it's kind of a pushover at points. Especially with, I mean, again, I think once you get all those 4 champion abilities, that really is what makes the game even easier. I feel like because you can just electrocute anyone around you in no time, or even just escape using the flying one.
Or get revived
also,
by Mipha's grace.
Or get revived, yeah, exactly. Straight up come back to life.
Yeah.
Who needs a resurrection shrine when you have that ability?
Right.
Going more to the bosses rather than Ganon, since they are kind of connected to him, and we did mention before as we were talking about the Divine Beast, I like that you don't need a specific item to beat them. Like, they were different in that way.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are also really easy, like using lightning arrows against the WATERBLIGHT, or freezing the FireBlight Ganon for the first half, all that stuff, and like none of them felt particularly challenging because of that, and I could just wail on them. Like, I kept my most powerful weapons. All right, boss is here. Break out the big stuff and just whittle them down in no time at all, and it just, I don't know, it felt a little bit more mindless than I'm used to for my Zelda bosses.
That,
yeah,
you're kind of touching on something there. I felt like the bosses failed to live up to the potential or the idea of the game.
Yeah.
With it being open-ended, the bosses felt anything but to me. It's like they for the most part felt pretty standard Zelda bosses, except lackluster ones.
But then, I guess to play devil's advocate, is that a function of the open world game design? I mean, how could Nintendo possibly know how powerful the player is going to be at every specific boss, especially considering how you can challenge them in any order you want? Like, I feel like we saw a version of this problem in A Link Between Worlds, but because that was a much smaller game, it wasn't quite as emphasized. But I mean, really, how could they have done it? I'm not saying it's not a problem, because it is, but how could they have done that and made it? Do you think they could have scaled the boss's power up depending on which one you choose as your first one and which one you take on last?
Yeah, because that's basically what they did with the overworld enemies.
Yeah, good point.
As you beat each Divine Beast, or rescued each one, the enemies around you got stronger.
Good point.
And that sort of kept the difficulty going at a nice pace no matter where you went. So they could have did the same thing there. It's, you know.
Oh, they could have had this they could have even explained it away within the logic of the story and had this throwaway line where, like, oh, you've defeated WaterBlight Ganon, but the malice he had is escaping, and going into the other 3, they're going to get stronger.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
They could have easily explained that away with one line, and it would have been perfect.
I like that idea. And I think another potential solution would have been, I think the bosses themselves could possibly have been, maybe you fought them in a linear order. So no matter which Divine Beast you go to, the bosses always appear in the same order. So you go from the weakest boss to the toughest boss.
Would that work, though? I mean, because they were all themed after their areas. Like, WaterBlight Ganon was the Zora boss, and FireBlight Ganon was the Goron boss. I mean, there were obvious thematic connections there.
Well, I don't
think
it's that important.
Yeah, but it also takes a little bit away because, you know, hey, I went to this boss first, and you, for whatever reason, or then you talk to somebody else who went to a different shrine. What boss did you get? It was this boss. Wait a second, I got that boss too.
You know what I like, though, is that it would actually have been different depending on which arena you're in.
True, but then the arenas wouldn't be designed specifically for the bosses, even though they weren't.
Yeah, well, they weren't anyway.
Well, the one wasn't, but I feel like the others generally were. Like, WaterBlight Ganon's arena was designed pretty well for that fight.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think that was the best water fight, the best boss fight in the game.
You think so?
I think so. Or yeah, no, I definitely think so.
Wow, I still would hand that to Thunderblight, despite the problems, just because he was the one that, I guess, the only one that put up a fight for me. But yeah.
It might be because I went to the WaterBlight one first.
Sure,
you didn't.
That's true.
So it was all new to me at that point.
Yeah.
In terms of bosses.
I think that does have a big effect. Although we are forgetting the best boss in the game, and that's the I forget his name, but the Yiga leader. My God,
what a dumb fight!
I love that.
Really?
Fight. Oh. I loved it. I loved how silly he was. I don't know. It was just something cool about hit him, knock it on his head, beat up on him. I don't know. There was something just classic about that fight that I so enjoyed.
I actually got a completely opposite read on that whole character. I can't even remember his name, but I felt like the way they presented the Yiga clan was not at all commensurate with with the leader and how they presented the leader. Like, he's this goofball, he's like a cartoon character, yet the Yiga clan are supposed to be this, these evil Sheikah who want to go assassinate Link, and I kind of thought they were messed up. I like their upside down Sheikah emblem, but then you get this goofball as the boss, and it completely undermined that whole clan for me. Like, totally.
I mean, I almost feel like, you could say the same thing about any point, or not any point, about a lot of points in Zelda, though.
You could. Like, I felt the same way about Bongo Bongo. I guess, like, my bigger problem with that character is the actual fight. I thought it was brain dead. It was absolutely the most brain dead fight in the game, in my opinion.
Who are you, Andre?
Man, we're having a body switching moment right now.
Obviously I maintain that I love the game overall, but the bosses I thought were among the weakest in Zelda in general, and I thought maybe that specific boss was maybe the worst offender of these bad bosses.
I don't know. I got some major enjoyment out of it. Yeah. Maybe because it was just so funny to me. I got, like, I enjoyed the humor. It had a lot of personality to him, and I don't know, I got a kick out of it. And just watching him fail constantly was, I don't know, fun.
One thing I do want to say that I did like across every single boss fight, and I kind of said this earlier about something else, was the presentation. I thought graphically their attacks were gorgeous. I loved the way they looked. I thought their designs were cool. And I thought the music was absolutely friggin' phenomenal because it actually had Ganon's theme worked into the boss theme. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Like, audio-visually, those boss fights were everything I wanted them to be. But mechanically, they just fell so short.
I did like how they kept the same, like, theme. Like, they're all made of malice, but they each have their own unique...
the lead instrument changes.
Design.
Oh, yeah. I see what you mean.
Just design-wise as well, they all looked different. They all looked unique to that area.
Yeah.
Despite all being made up of malice. That was, again, great design on their point.
That's true.
On their part.
And then one thing I noticed more recently is that even though the boss fight is the same, the boss theme is the same, there's a different lead instrument for each fight that's kind of associated with that race. So, and I thought that was pretty cool. That was kind of a nice way to tie in each boss fight, though while they're similar, they still have their own, they take place in their own unique parts of the world. I thought that was pretty cool.
Alright, well, let's finally discuss the second part of the Ganon battle. The Beast Ganon form.
Yeah.
I think for me the biggest issue is that I felt like this was their moment to really justify having that world. Like, I wanted a world, like a boss fight to scale the world, like on the world scale, like we actually took advantage of this world and how you learned to get about it, or even that gigantic field you have out in the middle, and they barely used it. Like, he just travels in a straight line, and you just have to target a few weak points on him.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like there could have been so much more they did with them, and ultimately they just made another, as we touched on earlier, another Divine Beast entrance.
It was so, oh man, I don't even know how to articulate this, because I was so simultaneously impressed and blown away by the audiovisual scale of it, but
yeah, it looked cool.
Absolutely just so disappointed, and just like bitterly disappointed by how brain dead easy it was, and just how literally he has one attack and it's to fire this really cool looking laser in a straight line that you will never get hit by unless you are not paying attention. Like, why didn't he have more than one attack?
I was almost wondering why you couldn't climb them. Like, climbing was such a big deal throughout this game. Like, and there's this huge version of Beast Ganon. Why couldn't we climb in order to do attacks or anything like that? Because it honestly threw me off. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? This is weird. And then my other issue with it is that this is completely my own fault. Because I rode horses so little in this game.
Well, everyone did.
Yeah, I ran right into him and lost my horse.
Oh, you did?
I had to fight him on foot.
So your horse died?
So, I don't know.
That's so funny.
He got stepped on and I couldn't find him again, so I think he died.
That's hilarious.
But then I had him after the boss fight, so I'm like, oh, okay, he's fine. He was like, he got stepped on. He's like, screw this, I'm out of here.
Well, I think you touched on something there, Derek. I don't think it was a very good idea for them to anchor the final boss, or the final part of the final boss, around this completely optional gameplay mechanic that you may not even encounter if you don't care about, riding horses. And more than that, I didn't think the horse riding was all that great. It wasn't bad, but I don't think the horse riding was all that amazing. Like, I didn't think the horse controls were necessarily as good as they needed to be for that fight or related fights, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, they were vastly improved from, say, Twilight Princess, But yeah, they still weren't amazing or anything, so...
I just like...
yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I mean, if they wanted to have... If they wanted to anchor the fight around the horse, that's fine, but then why not at least, like, have to, you know, navigate your horse around all these crazy laser attacks and stuff that Ganon's trying to stop you from getting too close, and then you get close and deliver damage. Like, jump off the horse. Like, I love your idea, Derek. Jump off the horse, climb up Ganon, and attack him, you know, attack some weak point on top of his body. That would have been cooler than what we got, which is fire light arrows at these giant glowing points. Why?
I think it's kind of ironic in a game built around being an open world game. This massive world, one of the biggest worlds we've seen in a game, and there's walls around Ganon. Like, you're stuck in that fight. You can't escape it, except through a glitch. And again, like, it's more the missed potential for me. Like, they had the opportunity to make this the coolest boss fight of all time, and I have one idea for what they could have done to really enhance it. But yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they just completely dropped the ball, like, just means the game ends on a bit of a whimper or a disappointment. But to get to my idea real quick, what they could have done, I felt like, and this kind of ties into something else I felt like they kind of like under-delivered on a little bit. This was a perfect chance to tie in the Divine Beasts. What should have happened is, Ganon should have had like one burst of energy, knocks out all 4 Divine Beasts. You have to race around the world, reactivating these Divine Beasts. Get them, you have to drive them yourself, get them into position to target their lasers on the Ganon before you go in for the final blow.
I think that sounds cool, but I don't know, I mean, given how much already else is in the game, I don't know how realistic that is in terms of the game they wanted to release.
And they're so far apart. Like, I guess you could teleport to them, but then you have that loading screen as you're teleporting to each one.
I feel like that might actually kill the vibe of the final boss.
No way.
The pacing.
Yeah.
You guys are disappointing me.
I mean, where I thought you were going. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I felt like it was a bit of a missed opportunity that you had these amazing Divine Beasts. They make a big deal about them having pilots and they can pilot these things, and they are little more than stationary structures. They don't amount to anything.
Right.
They barely do anything, and I felt like they could that would have been a good opportunity to make them, I don't know, feel like they have more purpose than just being something cool looking.
Maybe hold them off with the light arrows as the Divine Beasts are coming into position. Like, as you're fighting him, the Divine Beasts are coming towards you, or that sort of thing. Or maybe my idea, one of my ideas was there's a bit of a time limit to Ganon, because as you said, he's in a bubble. But maybe you have to go along him as he's going through this world, and he's like, for whatever reason, heading to Kakariko. Mm-hmm. And you got to protect Kakariko before it's destroyed.
Yeah, no, I like that too. Yeah, and I love the idea of getting the Divine Beasts involved, because I totally agree with you, Andre. They were underutilized, and I don't know if I agree with you that I wouldn't want to have to travel around to them, but if they could be, you know, like if you had to hold Ganon off while Derek's suggestion of getting them into place happened, I think that would be like, you couldn't actually damage Ganon yourself, but they can, so you hold them off while, you know, they get into position, and all the while, every guardian or every champion is talking to you and cheering you on. That brings all the races together, it brings all the champions together, it culminates everything for this final battle, instead of just having Zelda say, here's this bow of light, shoot, you know, these glowing points.
Yeah, that's what I was missing. It didn't feel like it built up to anything. It just felt like a boss fight. I don't know. It didn't feel like a culmination of anything in the game.
It did in terms of its presentation mostly, I think, but in terms of the mechanics, yeah, like like none of what you do, or very little of what you do in the final boss fight, you ever had to do in the game prior to it. And it's just, it doesn't feel like it's a true, like, you know, if you compare that to something like Splatoon's final boss, where it is a true test of every mechanic you've learned across the campaign.
Right.
And Zelda, by comparison, is not.
Well, we know the reason they didn't input the Divine Beast for this final battle, and once again, it's because you can go directly to the ending, and the Divine Beast wouldn't be there. So, what do you do in that case if you're not gathering up all the Divine Beasts for this fight? They essentially have to program two completely different fights, and I guess it's possible, but
I'm gonna throw it out there that, for me at least, I don't think it was that essential to have the opportunity to go fight Ganon before you do anything else in the game. I mean, it's cool that it's there, but how many people even realistically did that anyway besides speedrunners?
Yeah, I mean, I get why they did, because the whole point of this game is freedom. Do whatever you want, whenever you want. But I agree. Like, overall, that specific part of it didn't really ring much to me. I'm like, okay, I can go fight him anytime, but I'm not going to, and I'd rather not anyway. So I agree.
Yeah,
with you.
I mean, you're kind of cheating yourself out of value at that point. It's like you're missing the game if you just go fight Ganon.
I wonder if a more elegant way to do it would be like, and this is a random callback, I know, but Xenogears had this final boss where you had to defeat these 4 things connected to it. And depending on how many you defeated, the boss would be harder or easier. It wouldn't affect their health necessarily, or maybe it would, but it would just affect the variety and ferocity of their attacks. So I wonder if you could have had the Divine Beasts affect that, instead of just like cut off a sliver of his health, but just affect how difficult he actually is in terms of how much he throws at you and how much damage those things do.
Not a horrible idea, but the problem with that is you wouldn't know, you wouldn't have any basis for comparison.
Sure,
you wouldn't know, why is this actually easier than what it would have been otherwise, for instance.
Isn't part of the whole mystery endemic to this game, like you don't exactly know why everything is happening the way it is, but you just gotta think that's cool anyway and you go with it?
Oh man, you just kind of touched on a much broader point I wanted to bring up here.
Oh no.
But I don't know, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves again.
Let's just jump right into it. I pretty much said what I have to say about the final boss.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good to me, Derek, but unfortunately it's going to have to wait until part 3 of our Ultimate Zelda Breath of the Wild discussion, in which we discuss the mystery of the game, the characterization, voice acting, and lots more. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that coming up very soon. And with that, thanks for watching. Of course, make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain for lots more on Zelda Breath of the Wild and everything else Nintendo Switch as well. Catch you later. Bye.